Hey, what's up with it, guys? Welcome back to another video. Now this is going to be my phase 4 kind of prep and things to be trying to go for come ZG release in phase 4 for balanced Druid specifically. So we're going to go through a couple things because I know professions are changing. This will be kind of a longer video. I'm going to drop timestamps down below, but if you're like me, you're swapping professions, getting ready for Bloodvine set, all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to go over the professions that I'm running, ways I'm making gold, and then last I'm going to go over different gear sets. I'm going to go over a hit cap gear set, my ideal gear set, and then a PvP gear set. So depending on what you're trying to do, you know, one of those will be kind of a good benchmark for you to at least start with and kind of figure out if there's any stuff you want to change. So with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, guys, so for the professions now, Bloodvine set, as everyone is well aware, I'm sure if you're watching this video, is coming out in phase 4. That is basically going to be our go-to BIS setup for the vast majority, if not all, of raiding until like you have very good gear to replace those pieces with. Us having no hit in our talents makes it really important for us to get hit, and we actually are able to get hit cap with the phase 4 release and some items that are there, and I'll go through what those items are. So with that being said, I dropped herbalism, which I picked up tailoring now, so you can see, oops, let me do that. So we have tailoring maxed out here to 300, and I also have engineering to 300. Tailoring is also going to be a good way to make some passive gold because the Mooncloth cooldown is going to be going for a lot. So I suggest picking this up sooner than later so you can get that Mooncloth cooldown rolling as soon as possible. And if you're herbalism or some other, you know, profession, stock up on all those mats, swap over. Tailoring is pretty quick and easy to level. I'm sure the mats are going to be going up as you get closer to phase 4, so definitely should try and do that sooner than later. Now you don't need to have tailoring to actually use the Bloodvine set itself, but the set bonus does require tailoring, which is 2% crit, and that's really massive for us. So you're going to want to try and get tailoring if you're trying to actually optimize your PvE rotation. Pretty straightforward. Second one is engineering. Now, engineering is obviously the go-to for PvP. I don't need to elaborate on that. Everyone knows that. There's tons of content and videos out there explaining that, all the gadgets and things like that. However, there are some really significant PvE implications as it relates to us. So there is a helm that is crafted via engineering come phase 4, which is the Bloodvine goggles. Now I've heard so much about the Bloodvine set from tailoring, and I have heard hardly anything about the Bloodvine goggles. Now these have 2% hit, 1% crit, and 9 MP5. These are very good for us. They're not necessarily good for all casters because they don't really value MP5 the same way we do, and while crit does help increase caster's damage, it helps us significantly because of nature's grace. So the stats on this, while it has no stam or int or anything like that, it is very good for just straight up PvE DPS. So this is a big thing worth mentioning for phase 4 because hit cap is so hard and we need so much of it ideally to really optimize our PvE DPS. This is a really good way to get an extra 2% hit that other people that aren't engineering will not be able to get caster wise. I think that's pretty much it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else for engineering. Oh, sappers, I guess that's another big one. Sappers can really help on specific fights, really bump your DPS. So that's another thing that's worth mentioning about engineering. Now that's my plan as far as professions go come phase 4. So with that being said, let's go into the ways that I'm making gold. Okay guys, so for gold making, what I am doing is I was doing herbalism, and that was what I had instead of tailoring. But what I'm going to be doing now is there's 2 farms that I find actually really profitable. Now these relic coffer keys allow us to do a stealth relic coffer farm. I'm going to go ahead and run a clip here in the background. I'll speed it up. I did a time on this once. It took being stealthed, the entire run through of like the normal parts that you would stealth took me 9 minutes start to finish. So this means you can do 5 of these in 45 minutes. And currently when I was doing it, I'm getting around 30 gold an hour, and you can actually get lucky because greens and blues can also drop in the coffers. So like I got a ring the other day, it was like another 15 gold. So you can get lucky with some random drops. I'm not sure how valuable or how good the drops can be out of the coffers, but you definitely do get every one of these after I fill up my bags and I get locked. I have like 2 or 3 greens or blues. So you do get a handful of those as well. So that's a little bit of like leeway, but it only takes 45 minutes. So even though it's 30 gold, it's really in only 45 minutes. So realistically, it's closer to about 40-ish gold per hour. The reason this also makes a lot more sense is that because everyone's doing the Gore Shack farm, the mages are for AoE leveling, these keys drop from that. So before, when people first started doing this farm, the keys were around 25 silver a piece. I'm getting them between 7 and 10 silver a piece. So that reduction in the price to buy the keys makes it a lot more profitable and efficient for us. Not to mention, this is completely independent of whatever gear or spec you're running. You just invis the entire time. I don't have improved, cat stealth or anything like that. So you can literally run this as any spec as a druid. So it's a great way if you're a healer or whatever, you don't have any good farms, or maybe like you're on our server that's super busy and it's really hard to do stuff out in the open world because it's generally really contested. This is a really good alternative. It's not insane money, but it's good money, it's quick money, it's easy money, and you don't have to pay too much attention. It's really easy for you to watch Netflix or whatever on the other monitor. Now, the second gold farm that I wanted to mention is the Dire Maul tribute farm. Now, you will need a rogue in order to do this, and this does require a lot more focus and skill and coordination, and it is significantly easier if you have better gear. But this can actually be insanely profitable. People are still buying the rings out of tribute runs. They're still buying all of the items, honestly. The trinket is sold a lot. The transbane, the axe gets sold a lot. There's all kinds of stuff in the chest that is actually really valuable. Now, one other thing that's worth mentioning is before you open up the chest or talk to the guard, if you go and talk to Captain, I think that's what his name is, the guy that's basically guarding that last hallway, and you talk to him and make him run away, you get another guaranteed item out of the box, which means you get 3 blue items out of the box. You can do these runs in around 15 minutes if you know what you're doing and you don't wipe. If you wipe at all, you lose a significant amount of time and efficiency. So this is a little bit of a front-loaded learning curve because it's going to take you a good amount of time and trial and finding someone to run this with. So it's not as independent as the coffer key farm, but you can definitely get to the point where you're making around 100 gold an hour if you're really on point. The other thing that's really important to mention about this farm is that the major mana potions also drop out of the chest. So if you're running with a rogue, he doesn't need them. He can have the healing potions, you have the mana potions. So not only are you getting a really significant raw gold value, and if you maybe get a couple drops selling them in trade chat or world chat or whatever, but you're also getting up all your mana potions that you're going to need for raid and not having to spend gold on them. So it's a little bit of a 2-for-1 in that sense as far as raid prep as well as gold farming. Those are my 2 farms that I'm going to be really kind of focusing on if I'm trying to get any more gold. And so I wanted to mention those to you guys because you can do those with the current professions that I'm also running. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the gear. Now there are 3 sets of gear I'm going to go through. My PvE hit cap setup, my PvE ideal setup where we're not actually at hit cap, but we have a really high just overall damage and output, I would say, and then my PvP ideal setup with the pieces I'm going to be trying to get to optimize my DPS in PvP scenarios. So first, let's go through the hit cap setup. Now, I mentioned the engineering goggles in the Helm slot here. Now, that's a good alternative on this set, but this actually puts you over hit cap if you were to use these. Granted, getting all of these pieces is going to be hard, so very likely you won't have some of these other slots, and these engineering goggles are a foolproof way for you to get 2% hit. In addition to this, if you for example, you can't get the tier or something like that, you can pick up the 2% in this head slot. But obviously Mishundare is the ideal scenario, and if you can get all these items, this should yield you significantly more DPS. So that's why we have this here. But just keep that in mind. If you're under 16%, you need 2 more percent. Bloodvine Goggle will also get you to 16%. Now, we have the neck piece. This is off of a car. This is basically an improved version of Star of Mystaria, giving us 1% hit. There are no hit items as far as our shoulder slot is concerned, so I just have Mantle of the Blackwing Cabal right here. We have Cloak of Consumption, also off Hakar, giving us another 1% hit. We obviously have the Bloodvine chest piece, 2% hit from that. Bracers of Arcane Accuracy off Broodlord and BWL, that's another 1%. blood tinged gloves. These are off of Jindo. Jindo drops a handful of really good caster items, so that's going to be a big boss to make sure that you're getting every ZG reset you can. But these are 1% hit as well. All the stats on these are also very good. Now I have Angelisa's Grasp. Here, this is another example of a 2% hit item that if you can't get this belt, or you have like Mana Igniting Cord, for example, because that's at a Molten Core, might be a little bit easier. You throw the the Bloodvine Goggles over here in your head slot, you run Mana Igniting Cord, and you can balance out the hit that way as well. But I have Angelisa's Grasp here as well for the 2% hit. Bloodvine Legs, Bloodvine Boots, that's another 2% between those two. Now, if you get these two rings, these are 3% hit between these two rings. So in an ideal world, this is going to yield you the most hit. These should be a lot easier to get than stuff out of BWL, I would think. Like Band of Force Concentration is very good. It's basically an upgraded version of this exact ring. However, this has the set bonus, and since ZG is going to have like a 3-day reset, I believe, these should be a little bit easier for you to actually get your hands on. Last but not least, on the armor slots, we have the Tier. Now, Tier is going to be a tough one to get. That's a really kind of wishful thinking item. Again, like I mentioned, if you're not able to get this 2% hit, the Engineering Goggles will fill that spot. Onto the weapons, I have Lockamere. Fill this in with any one-hander that you want, Claw Chromagus or whatever. And then I have Jindo, the bag, which is the offhand 1% hit on this. There's also a two-handed staff of the Jindo. If you're not getting a good weapon, the two-handed staff has 10% hit. And so that's another alternative as well, where you'd have even more hit than what I have with this setup, because you'd have 1% more basically on your other weapon. So I wanted to show you guys that it is possible. There's, like I mentioned, a few options and other ways to add hit here and there, where you actually can get around like 18 or 20%, I think, if you were to stack every slot with hit where it's available. So let's go through and we'll add it up. So we got 1 on the neck, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15%, and then the offhand giving us 16% hit. Now, I don't think this is going to yield the most DPS possible, but it would be really, really close. And even if you're using world buffs and full consumes, this might actually even be the best option, because you don't lose a ton of stats as far as like spell damage or crit going with all these slots. But a couple good options, which I'll go over in the next gear set, are things related to like Choker of the Fire Lord or Mana Igniting Cord, which have very, very high DPS outputs in those individual slots. So over here, I think this is around 11 or 12% hit between this setup. But you see we have Mishundare in our Helm slot. We have Choker of the Fire Lord, Mantle of the Blackwing Cabal, Cloak of Consumption, and then we got the Bloodvine set with the chest, leg, and boots. We got the Bracers of Arcane Accuracy, the Blood Tinged Goggles, which those are the same. Now we have Mana Igniting Cord for our waist slot item. I really like this item a lot. There's also the one that's out of BWL that has, I think, 35 damage, and it has MP5 instead of crit. That's another really good option. But for me personally, I'm going to be trying to stack crit as much as I can, because the fights are generally lasting so short. As much crit as we can get, up to 40% with full world buffs and all that stuff, is going to, I think, be the biggest DPS boost we can possibly gain. Now on to my rings. I plugged in the rings that I already have that are already good, because come ZG, I'm going to be passing on any of the other like rings or anything until everyone else gets them, because I already have 2 really good rings. So we have Band of Force Concentration and Ring of the Black Rock. Now I actually really like these rings, and if I'm able to get hit in my other item slots, that's still preferred in my opinion with my personal playstyle and what I'm trying to run. Now on to the trinkets. Obviously we have a few options here. Again, Netherian's Tier is going to be really hard to get, I think, in general. We've seen one drop, actually, I should say. We've seen one drop, but it's going to be a tough one to get. It could be 3, 4, 5 months out before I get a chance to actually get this. Now, onto the trinkets, we have Toep, which is obviously good, but is a little bit tough to get. The ZG trinket is a very, very similar trinket, and this will be actually pretty easy, I think, because it's a guaranteed drop off of a car, and the ZG reset is quick. So after like a month, all of your casters basically should have this. Everything that I've read and how I understand it is this is significantly better for casters than it is for the other classes. It's good for everyone, but casters gain a massive bonus from this, especially because it lasts for 20 seconds, and some of the fights in general between Molten Core, BWL are lasting so short. This is a massive DPS gain for casters. So with that being said, this is another alternative, and I potentially am going to try and do something like this, maybe get the ZG Charm and Toep and be able to chain them back to back. You can't stack them and cast them at the same time, but you can chain them back to back, as I understand it, how most of these trinkets work. We're going to test that out as soon as we get it, but that would give us a 35-second window of just having an insane amount of damage on top of world buffs, on top of consumes. So that's another kind of idea that I'm playing with here on my trinkets. And I think Zandalarian Hero Charm is going to be easier to get than Neltharian's Tear. So and then onto the weapons. This is going to be my ideal setup. Jindo, Bag of Whammies in the offhand, and Lochmere, which we already have for our main hand. So let's go ahead and add up the hit here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is at 9. If we get the Neltharian's Tear, that's at 11. Again, if we get lucky with some other pieces, we can throw some stuff in there. I think it's going to be hard for me to get Mishundare, so realistically at the beginning of the phase 4, phase 5, more realistically, I'm going to have Bloodvine Goggles in my Helm, which gets us up to 13% hit. So somewhere around that 12 to 14% is kind of what I'm trying to get to in a perfect world, but we'll have to see what drops and what we're able to get our hands on. So on to the PvP setup. If you watched any of my PvP stuff, you'll know that there's a few items on here that I really like for PvP. That are a little more oddball, one being the heavy dark iron ring. This just has so much stamina, and the armor scaling into Moonkin form is really strong for us. With this setup of gear, what I'm running is you are actually PvP hit capped at 3%. You also have a good amount of just overall damage. Okay guys, on to our PvP setup. Now this is basically prioritizing 3% hit, which is PvP hit cap, and then as much stamina, intellect, spell damage, armor, and crit as we can get within reason. So I'm basically trying to pick all the items that have the most of those preferred stats to give us the most value. Now we are wearing a lot of cloth with this setup. This is definitely a more offensive, bursty, overall trying to maximize your damage type build rather than some kind of survival utility build. So keep in mind you are going to be a little bit of a glass cannon with this setup, but if you're good at timing your Moonkin form and bear form and kiting, you should be fine running this setup. So let's get right into it. We got the Helm off of Neff in a perfect world. We got Choker of the Fire Lord, Mantle of the Blackwing Cabal, Cloak of the Brood Lord, Robe of Volatile Power. Now I actually prefer this over any of the other chests because it has the 2% crit on it, which is really massive. It's a little bit lower on DPS compared to some of the other items, but I really like that 2% crit. Now we have Bracers of Arcane Accuracy. That's going to give us our first percent of hit. Taut Dragonhide Gloves off Chromagus. Again, these have no damage on them, but they have the crit, they're leather, and they have 20 int, 20 stamina. So this is a really big piece just to give you a lot of stats and armor. Onto the belt, we got Mana Igniting Cord. We have Blood Tinged Kilt out of ZG. Now, this is not a piece I'm going to be using in PvE. Flare Core Mantle actually has more DPS than this. Just has more damage on it, but this has stam and intellect on it, and it's still got a good amount of damage. So the Flare Core leggings have no intellect on them, so for that reason I would prefer these. Both of them are cloth, so in a perfect world. Now onto the boots, we got Betrayer's Boots. These are also out of ZG. Int, stam, and 30 spell damage. They are cloth. I'm sure there's some other alternatives. You can use PvP boots or something like that too, but I'm going to be going for these to try and maximize our DPS. Now we have Band of Force Concentration giving us that 1% hit. The int, stam, spell damage on it is super nice. On to my favorite PvP weapon, or sorry, my favorite PvP item, the Heavy Dark Iron Ring. We got 110 armor and 20 stamina. This is massive for PvP. Really gives you a lot of tankiness. Obviously you can use any caster ring in here that you want, but I really like this ring for PvP. We have PvP Trinket just as a space holder here. You can obviously use any of these DPS trinkets if you're trying to maximize your damage even more, or maybe some kind of engineering trinket. We got Toep. Again, sub this out with anything you want. Zandalar here, Charm, an engineering trinket, whatever floats your boat. We got Lochmere in our main hand, and we got Jindo's Bag of Whammies. So the bracers, our ring, and our offhand give us the 3%, and we are stacked with damage, crit, int and stam with the rest of these items. So more realistically, what I'll probably end up having is something like this that I'll be running most of the time, I would think. I don't run with a PvP trinket all that much in Battlegrounds because it's a 5-minute cooldown and really only helps if you're 1v1ing a Warlock or a Rogue, and 1v1s are so rare in the BGs, honestly. Most of the time it's just been team fighting. So this is kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to be running. So hopefully that helps you guys. These are just some sets I'm going to be trying to go for, pieces I'm going to be trying to get for Phase 4. Hopefully you guys are a little more prepared and ready to go. I don't want to make this video too long, so with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.